Okay. This is a story about when I did 4 grams of mushrooms and had a little bit of a crazy time. You could actually see a video of the beginning of the trip. It's on my channel. What I was able to get video footage of was like the first hour and a half of the trip. Up until then, it was a pretty good trip. So this was a little while ago. I was planning on taking these 4 grams of mushrooms. My girlfriend was out of town visiting her family, and I was going to have our apartment all to myself, so I thought that would be a good time to do it. So the day started out pretty good. I woke up, I went for a really nice long run. It started drizzling a little bit when I was running, but the weather was like still really hot, so it was a nice jog. Then, as soon as I got home from the jog, I took like a freezing cold shower and did a few rounds of Wim Hof breathing in the shower. So I was doing all this like weird shit to like rev myself up to have a really great mushroom trip. So I started eating the mushrooms at around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I hadn't eaten any food that day yet, but I wasn't really hungry, and I kind of thought if I fast and eat the mushrooms, it'll be even more fun than it normally would be. And initially, I was only going to take 3.5 ounces just to call it like a whole eighth. But when I put the mushrooms on my scale, it all worked out to 4 ounces, and it was like 3 mushrooms total. And I didn't want to start breaking pieces of the mushrooms off, so I just decided to take the 4 grams. And the mushrooms were very oddly sized too. Two of them were tiny, and one of them was huge. One of the mushrooms weighed like 2.5 ounces, and then the other two were, you know, 3/4 of an ounce each, something like that. So I ate the first mushroom, and it went pretty smooth, like I would normally expect. I'd done mushrooms a lot in the past, so it wasn't like my first time doing it, but it was definitely my first time doing such a large dose. Normally, I would only do like 1 gram or 2 grams. 4 grams was a lot more than I'm used to doing. So I ate the two small mushrooms first, and that went pretty well. And then I started eating the big mushroom, and I could just feel it right away. Like that mushroom tasted different than the other mushrooms. Whatever that flavor that psilocybin mushrooms give off it was much more potent and stronger in this larger mushroom. So I really took my time chewing these mushrooms. I chewed each mushroom for like a solid minute each, and the big mushroom was so big that I had to bite pieces of it off and chew it, but it took me like 5 minutes to chew the big mushroom. And I swear to God, like, it's gonna sound weird, but as I was chewing the big mushroom, I started feeling like I was fucking tripping already. And I know that's like basically impossible to feel like you're tripping 5, 10 minutes after you start eating mushrooms, but I think I was just so like just charged up and looking to really want to have a big intense trip. It was some sort of weird placebo effect. And so once I had eaten them, there was nothing else left to do but just to kind of sit around and wait for them to really kick in. So I sat down and I thought, oh, I'll watch a movie. There's a movie that I really love, highly recommend it. It's called A Field in England, and it's basically like a mushroom trip of a movie. Like the whole movie is one giant mushroom trip. So I thought, oh, this would be cool to watch while I'm tripping or waiting to trip on mushrooms. So I popped it on, and I was able to get through like the first fucking 5 to 10 minutes before I had to turn it off. Like it was too much. It was too much stimulation and too many things to look at, too many sounds. It was just way too intense. So I turned the movie off, and initially my plan for this trip was just to kind of eat the mushrooms and just have a weird little private time with myself in my apartment. I thought I would lay on the couch for a while with my eyes closed and see if I have any cool visuals. I thought I would meditate. I thought I could explore my apartment, which is something that I really enjoy doing on low doses of DMT. Sometimes you can find secret little universes in the corner of your bathroom that you would never have known existed. So I guess I didn't have a great plan as to what I was going to do once I really started the trip. I was just kind of sitting around waiting for the fun to begin. As I was sitting and waiting, it was really weird. a huge thunderstorm rolled in. It wasn't kind of out of nowhere because it was drizzling all day, but it was one of those storms where it's like overcast 1 second and all of a sudden it's like dark outside. In New York, when we get these like emergency broadcast thingies, it beams over to your phone, and if you don't have the notification turned off on your phone, it'll create this really loud, scary, like alert noise. Sounds like this, which is already a very grating and annoying sound. And it started like thundering and raining really hard and getting really windy. And all of that, coupled with the emergency broadcast noise, really gave me like a dark feeling. Like I felt like some really bad shit was about to go down. But then for a second, I was like, man, fuck this. Like, I'm going to have a good time on mushrooms. I don't care if it rains or not. And so I started looking out of my window at the storm as it was unfolding. I was watching the trees sway in the rain and wind, and I started getting like a really nice feeling. All of a sudden, the mood of the storm and the trip changed a little bit. So after a little while of watching the storm, it died down. It was one of those like Fast and Furious type of storms. And I started feeling like, really excited, and I don't know, I felt like I was a scientist doing some weird experiment. So I took out my little voice recorder and I just started talking into it and saying what I was feeling and things like that, what I was thinking. It was some interesting shit, but by and large, it was just a bunch of like nonsense, you know, the trees dance for me type of bullshit. After a little while, I decided to start filming myself, mostly because I couldn't believe the way I was feeling and the things that I was thinking and the things that I was seeing. So I wanted to kind of confirm to myself that it was actually real. So seeing myself on the phone, it was like very comforting. It kind of confirmed for me that, oh yeah, this is really happening and I'm a real person. So I started recording myself, and you can watch the video. It's on my channel. It's just me doing a bunch of goofy, oh, I'm fucked up on mushrooms type of stuff. Very standard. At some point, I was like in my closet, and I don't remember why I was there or how I got in there. And you could kind of see like that I am genuinely filled with like astonishment and amazement at my experience, and it was really good. I was really enjoying it up until a certain point, which you can see in the video towards the end. I'm like laying on the couch and I'm like, why is this so difficult? It was at that point where the real trip started. And at that point, it was already like an hour and a half, 2 hours into the trip. And, the whole time while I'm recording myself, I'm thinking, well, this is the trip. Like, it's not going to get more intense than this. I'm already hallucinating and having insane abstract thoughts. This is great. This is how it's going to be for the next 6, 7 hours. My personal theory is for the first hour and a half, 2 hours, I was tripping off those 2 little mushrooms that I ate. But then at hour 2, that's when the big guy kicked in. That's just my opinion. I know there's like literally no science to back that up or anything like that. But sometimes your feeling in the moment can be a lot more real than any science. So once the video cuts off, at that point I started to panic a lot. And I, for whatever reason, started having these thoughts of like something really, really big is coming. Really what I was feeling was this huge wave of psilocybin working its way through me. But what it felt like was, oh, something that's about to change you forever is about to happen. And the way I interpreted that was, I'm about to die. Because that's the ultimate thing that can happen to you that'll change everything forever. I started getting really scared. I legit thought I was about to die. I couldn't imagine what else could feel this so intense and monumental other than death. And of course, like, it was a kind of dying. It was like ego death and identity death. Because I was alone and I was already a little nervous, anxious to begin with, I didn't go in that direction of, oh, this is just my ego dying. I went in the direction of, oh, my body is about to die. I've taken a lethal, poisonous dose of mushrooms. This is it. I'll be the first person in the history of fucking the world to overdose and die from psychedelic mushroom poisoning. And that's that. So what I started to do was I started texting my girlfriend at this point. And I started texting her, hey, I'm really fucked up on mushrooms right now. Can you do me a favor? Can you just text me back? And she didn't respond. And of course, it felt like 15 years had passed, but like in reality, like 1 minute had passed. And so I sent her another text, and it was like, "Hey, it's starting to bug out. Can you just text me so I know that you're real?" She didn't text me back. So now at this point, I'm thinking, oh, she's not real. I've never been real. The only reality I've ever known my entire life is I've been tripping on mushrooms, and that's that. So I started getting really scared because it really started to feel like the whole life that I had lived up until the trip never really happened. And the only thing that ever really happened to me was this trip. And I was desperate for confirmation that I was, in fact, a person that existed. So I texted her one more time and I was like, "Do you exist?" Just like that. No response. And then the last text I sent her was, "Do you exist?" All caps with like a million question marks and exclamation marks. And I was being dead serious when I was sending those texts. I wasn't trying to make a joke or being weird. I like legitimately wanted to know if she actually ever did exist. So she didn't respond, of course. So some time passes, whatever, 3,000 years. I decide to bite the bullet and give her a phone call. It rang a couple times, and finally she picked up and she was like, "Hey, what's up?" And I just immediately started crying hysterically. And I was like, "I don't know what's up. I ate some mushrooms and now I don't know what's happening. I don't know if I exist. I don't know if you exist. I don't know what anything has ever existed." And I just sort of unloaded on her like that. And she just, she did a good job. Like she was trying to be very reassuring, and she was like, "No, you exist. I'm real. You're real. It's just that you had some mushrooms and now you're tripping." And for the life of me, I couldn't believe her. Like, I didn't think she was being honest, or I thought she didn't know what she was talking about. And it just became this insane cycle of me asking her over and over, "How do I know you really exist? How do I know I really exist? Just because you say exist doesn't mean I exist. Maybe you don't exist, so everything you tell me isn't true." And I just started going around in circles like this for like 20, 30 minutes. And meantime, I keep like bouncing all over my apartment. I'm like underneath the kitchen table, I'm in the closet, I'm fucking in very random places in the apartment, and I don't really remember why I was doing that, but I think in retrospect, I was trying to find a safe place, or a place that I felt safe at in our apartment. In the openness of the living room or the bedroom, it felt very scary. It felt like everyone could see what I was doing. But if I could somehow hide in the closet or hide in the table, no one would see me fucking lose my mind or whatever the hell was happening to me. So eventually she says, "Well, why don't I send you a video call and you could see that I exist?" And I thought that was a good idea. So we started doing that. She gave me a video call and I could see her face, and the way I saw her face was insane. Like, at this point, the level of hallucinations were over the top. Like, I can't even describe them. Like, it felt like her face was oozing out of the screen, but at the same time, like, exploding in all different directions, at the same time constantly shifting colors and shapes and morphing from one thing to another thing. And it was just like every moment I looked at it, it was something different and more insane than the last time. The only problem was seeing her video call it didn't convince me. I just thought that she was a hallucination. And I even was saying to her, like, "Well, if you're so real, how come you're not here right now in front of me?" And she had to explain how, well, she's in another state to visit her family. And none of that made any sense to me. I didn't understand what a state was. I didn't understand what a family was. The only thing I could remember is I need this person to convince me of something. I couldn't even remember what it was anymore. At some point, she had said something to me like, "You just need some time to pass. And as time passes, you'll feel better as the trip wears down." And so as soon as she says that, I got obsessed with the concept of time. And I started asking her, "What time is it now? What time is it now? What time is it now?" Literally every 10 to 20 seconds, asking her what time it was, because she told me that if time passed, I would feel better. And time was passing and I wasn't feeling better. So I kept saying, how come I'm not getting better? Time's passing. And she was like, not enough time has passed. So I would say, okay, how much time has passed now? And she would say, it's been 10 seconds. And I would say, so how come I don't feel better? And it just kept going around and around like that. It was a nightmare. It was awful. And I could hear in her voice, like she started getting worried. I think the repetitiveness of the questions and the fact that main I couldn't hold on to any information that she was trying to tell me. I think it was worrying her. So eventually she asked me if I wanted help. Like, do I want her to call an ambulance for me? Do I want her to call a friend for me? And I pretty much didn't even understand the concepts of what she was saying. Like, I didn't understand what help was. I didn't understand what an ambulance was. She said the name of a friend. She asked if I wanted to see if the friend could come over and help me. And I couldn't even recall what that friend was. Like, she said his name, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know what that is. While I'm talking to her, the trip is getting more and more and more intense, and everything is feeling more and more crazier. I started to feel like I was stuck in the ultimate loop. Everyone who's ever had a bad trip kind of understands the loops that you can get stuck in. And I think one of the things that was messing me up is because I kept asking the same questions over and over again, my girlfriend kept giving the same answers. She was like repeating things word for word. And that really elevated the feeling like I was stuck in a cycle. Because I was like, look, she's stuck in it too. She's also just a part of my trip and not even a real thing. Another big issue I was having is I was having like incredibly high levels of amnesia. I couldn't remember what I was, who I was. I couldn't remember eating mushrooms. My memory was going back about 10 seconds, and every 10 seconds it was getting wiped clean, and I would have to start fresh. And it was very frustrating. As the trip got more and more intense, I started kind of blanking in and out of consciousness. I wouldn't really call it a blackout, but it felt more like a whiteout. I just remember one moment looking at the phone, and the next moment I'm in a purely white space. And it's just white for miles and miles and miles. And things were pretty calm in that white space. I wasn't really feeling anxious or scared in that white space, but then I would come out of the white space back into my closet or wherever the hell I was, and everything was confusing and insane. And I was going in and out of this whiteout state maybe every 2 minutes or so. In one of these whiteouts, I remember seeing what I think was essentially my brain. Like, it was like this oblong-shaped, wrinkly, weird thing. And anyway, it felt to me like it represented my brain. As I stared at this brain, it started to like vibrate a lot. And then it started to eat itself, kind of like, if you could imagine like a snake eating its tail. But it was just like this endless, infinite loop of my brain eating itself and then regenerating and eating itself, regenerating, eating itself, regenerating. And it was doing that over and over and over again, and the speed was getting faster and faster and faster. And I felt like at the end of that process, I would go completely insane. And it wasn't like, it didn't feel like it would be temporary or anything like that. It felt like, oh, this is what it looks like literally when you lose your mind. It eats itself until there's nothing left. And, you know, I got to give my girlfriend a lot of credit. During these whiteouts, she wouldn't like disturb me. She would just periodically just ask me if I was okay. I think she was worried about me not breathing or something like that. The problem was in between these calm whiteouts was frantic insanity. I would wake up, I wouldn't know where I was. I'd be holding my phone. I'd see this crazy looking person on my phone, just like running from room to room basically in my apartment, and kind of like walking into walls and closed doors. And I was very disoriented. I couldn't really control my body enough to walk properly. I kept waking up in odd places and odd positions. At some point, I woke up in the bathroom laying down next to the bathtub. What was happening in my mind is I kept feeling like I was about to break through something. I was either about to go fully insane or have some sort of amazing spiritual psychedelic breakthrough, or I would just stop tripping. I kept waiting for one of those three things to happen, and none of them really happened. It would just jump from thing to thing to thing. And imagine, every 10, 15 seconds, your entire framework for reality and your consciousness and your sanity is shifting from one extreme to the next over and over again for hours and hours and hours. At some point, my phone started running low on battery, and it was like a whole 15-minute insane existential nightmare just for me to figure out how to plug a fucking cord into my phone. I couldn't figure out the mechanics of it. Like, I was holding up the cord to my phone just like this and expecting it to magically charge. And my girlfriend was like, no, you have to actually insert the plug into the phone. And so I would just put the cord next to the plug and think magically somehow it would crawl itself into the thing. Like, I literally couldn't perform basic mechanical processes. And at some point she asked me, what time did you take the mushrooms? Because she was trying to figure out what time my trip would end. And I was like, I don't know what time is, blah, 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 blah. And then it hit me. I had left myself a note before I ate the mushrooms. And I'll try to find it and flash it on the screen. Essentially what it said was, you are on mushrooms. You'll feel normal by 8 or 9 o'clock, something like that. I love you. Have a fun trip. So it was really just like a joke. But I remembered the note when she asked me what time I took it. And I found the note on my computer desk, and I read it out loud, and it made everything click for some reason. And it immediately calmed me down, and essentially, like, the nightmare portion of the trip was over. I was still blanking in and out. I was still forgetting things. Every time I would sort of forget what was going on and get scared for a moment, I would look at the note, read it out loud over and over and over again, and that would calm me. And that, like, calm down period lasted like another hour and a half, and I was finally kind of back. Like, I was able to hold up a conversation with her. I was able to say things to her that actually made sense. Wasn't all the way back, but I was back. And I just sort of continued coming down like that and talking to her on the phone. Eventually, we sort of decided that I was okay enough to sort of let her go, because she was in a different state and trying to meet up with her family and friends and stuff like that, and I was kind of delaying her on doing that. So we hung up. By the time I hung up with her, I was probably like 80% back to normal. I was still tripping. I was still having some weird perceptional and visual effects, but I wasn't feeling out of my mind anymore. So I vaped a little weed, and I went for a walk outside. And of course, it was like the most amazing walk I had ever been on in my life. It was nighttime. It was warm. There weren't a lot of people out. While I was walking, I saw a white bat, which is not maybe so insanely rare in New York. We do get bats, but I'd never seen a white one before. That's pretty much it. Came back home from my walk and felt 100% back to normal. Did a lot more weed to sort of try to feel even more normal, and then had a nice sleep. So that was my crazy mushroom trip. Obviously, like, I did a lot of shit wrong, but I also did a lot of things right. And I think ultimately I did get the big, profound, crazy trip that I wanted, but it just didn't quite go the way I was hoping or thinking. In a weird way, now that I think back on it, really did enjoy that trip. And even when I was finally snapping out of it during the trip, I was like, wow, that was interesting. I think that was the furthest over the edge I had ever gone with my psychedelic use. I had moments on DMT before where I felt like I lost my mind and all that stuff, but losing your mind for 10 minutes is a lot different than losing it for 5 hours. But I definitely don't regret it, and I did mushrooms again a couple months later, much more conservative dose, and I had a tremendous trip. If you want, you can check out the video of the beginning of the trip. I'll put it in the description. That video actually went viral for a moment. It got like over 100,000 views very quickly, and then it got totally algorithmed, and now it's like not getting any views. Anyway, stay weird. See ya.